Cyberpunk Jordan.
Welcome! As you descend towards the lobby, here's a couple of important announcements. Jordan's Soapbox is supported via Patreon, because running the only active volcano hotel in Orlando is expensive. Also, there's all the Sonic comics I have to acquire. Supported for behind-the-scenes access and other rewards, such as choosing a topic. Support isn't all monetary. If you like the video and want to see more, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Lastly, for the most up-to-date information and news, be sure to join our Discord server. It's also somewhere where you can vote for topics and hang out with me. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, my gummy bears. My name is Jordan, also known as CJ, and welcome back to Jordan's Soapbox, the show that talks about anything that I want to talk about. It's been a little while since we've last met. Quite a lot of changes have happened, as you can see. We finally renovated the Jordanian Volcano Hotel, and now it's slightly less dangerous than it was before. Slightly. But it's still the same show as always. Me talking about Sonic the Hedgehog and Sega-related stuff. And since it is that spooky time of the year, what better way to celebrate than with a future that can seem quite scary to some? Mobius 30 years later. It's surprising that I haven't talked about Mobius 30 years later before, but before we do, I kinda need to deliver some important context on where Mobius 30 years later came from. Starting with the whole Sonic Universe thing, cause I actually haven't talked about it on this show before. Now, for context, Archie Sonic is no stranger to having a secondary series in its lineup, or even several. It used to have things like Knuckles the Echidna and the Sonic Super Special series back in the 1990s. But by the early 2000s, those series would disappear, and kind of left Sonic the Hedgehog on its own until the arrival of Sonic X as a secondary book. It was no surprise that Sonic X would be getting its own comic book considering its popularity in North America. And for what it is, I mean, I know that not everyone likes it. I certainly do. It also gave us one of the best panels of all time. I mean, seriously, look at this. But eventually, with the show's conclusion, the comic book version of Sonic X2 would end, and it would be made way for another series, Sonic Universe. And the idea behind Sonic Universe, or at least how it was structured, was nothing short of genius. It usually consisted of an arc that was made up of 4 issues focusing on a specific story. And while those stories very much varied, most of them were fantastic, such as Scourge Lockdown and the Silver Saga being some of my personal favorites. It allowed for breathing room for ideas and concepts that just may not have come to be if it were not for Sonic Universe. Mobius 30 Years Later, to me, was no exception. Mobius 30 Years Later is set on Light Mobius, an alternate version of Mobius where the events that maybe could be the future of Sonic, yeah, it's a whole can of worms. I am not getting into it today. Although the idea for future events can be kind of traced back to Sonic in Your Face from October 1994, which depicted a future that saw the end of Dr. Robotnik, Sonic and Sally marrying and having children, and so forth. It's really not a surprise then that something like this would be revisited in stuff like Mobius 25 years later and its sequel, Mobius 30 years later. It is difficult to talk about Mobius 30 years later without at least mentioning Mobius 25 years later, its direct predecessor, but you know what? I am not talking about Mobius 25 years later. We'll give it this, it had so much potential and it just was simply squandered. Even with Ian taking over, the damage was done. Mobius 30 years later, on the other hand, while being a continuation of that storyline and referencing its events, can be really considered its own thing, and you know what? We're going to be treating it as such for this review. Besides, the opening monologue of this issue by Sasha Calle explains everything we need to know beforehand. This version of Mobius saw Shadow take over and was a bad King of Mobius, married Sally Acorn, Who would freaking ship that? And lastly, being overthrown by Lara Sue, who is the daughter of Knuckles and Julie Sue, and others. Thus, with King Sonic and Queen Sally on the throne, it's been a peaceful time for Mobius for half a decade, and big celebrations are underway. The entire first issue is more of an introduction issue, introducing us to the story so far and the main characters of King Sonic, Queen Sally, Lara Sue, and so on and so forth. And honestly, I really think it succeeds in doing so. It is a limited time to do so, but it makes effective with how the story flows. It feels natural and nothing really feels forced. Everything kind of just works. But of course, it can't all be rainbows and sunshine in the future, which is when we are introduced to one of our villains of the arc, Linda. Full disclosure, I kinda had a crush on her when I was a little kid. Oh, come on. I was like 8 or something. Give me a break. Oh, come on. She was objectively hot. Fine, I'll stop talking about childhood crushes. Anyway, one thing I really love about Linda in this arc is that she's not just simply a one-note villain, but one of complexity in terms of her motivations. Linda was essentially the right-hand woman of the former King Shadow, and his overthrow is what she blames on the anarchy in the world and how separated she is from her son Rundon. However, while her actions are unquestionably villainous, she also tries not to have those deemed innocent to suffer for it. It's best seen when she has the opportunity to harm Lara Sue, but wants to avoid harming the children of King and Queen Sally, since she believes they are innocent. It adds a layer of sympathy to her, and it becomes important as the arc continues on. When we finally do arrive at those celebrations, we have a scene that I think exemplifies something I've conveniently skipped over when it comes to Mobius 30 years later so far. The utter weirdness of it. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Archie Sonic is weird on its own, like just standard weirdness, but Mobius 30 years later takes the cake in terms of the weirdness cake. And if that cake does exist, can I have some, please? It has just a lot of weird stuff in terms of character relationships, offspring of characters, and so on. Chief example of which is the fact that in this version of Mobius, Tails married Mina Mongoose, complete with 2 children named Sky and Melody Prower. What even happened to Ash? Oh wait, I think I remember. I teleported him out of that reality and threw him into the sun because he was annoying. I think I really have violated way too many of the Geneva Conventions when it comes to this technology of mine. Anyway, it's a future that's so out there in terms of what future this is that you can't help but have fun with it and just please don't take it too seriously. Because, like, Mobius 30 years later really shouldn't be taken that seriously. It's fun, that's all. Amidst the celebrations, we have the villains making their move. I love this bit with all the teams checking in with one unable to come because of traffic. As if you wouldn't be suspected due to having a dark looking car that sticks out like a sore thumb. Seriously, I knew villains were kind of idiots in this, but geez. Linda is nonetheless able to successfully fire a rocket launcher at King Sonic, but before certain doom, it is stopped by none other than Silver the freaking Hedgehog. Just for some context, Silver has appeared in the comic before, starting with Hedgehog Havoc, but considering the entire concept of Mobius 30 years later as a future vision for these characters, having a character whose sole shtick is that he comes from a ruined future is just nothing short of brilliant. It really makes the arc that much fun with his presence there. It's a continuation of his search for a traitor that will destroy his future. Well, more accurately, something in Light Mobius soon will be destroying his future, or something like that. One thing I really want to point out with the dialogue is there's this bit of dialogue where he wonders if Sally would be a traitor, which has to be intentional considering Mecha Sally. Like, please. Please tell me that was intentional. Of course, for our heroes, this is only a brief break, as the Dark Presence, essentially offshoots of the Dark Egg Legion under King Shadow and, whatever, makes their move on the Prowers and then Castle Mobius. This is where some of the coolest moments of the arc come from me. such as when a maid turns out to be working for the Dark Presence and knocks out Silver, only to be knocked out herself using the same weapon by King Sonic. But the real highlight for me is this scene when King Sonic and Queen Sally bicker when the latter is asked to take the kids and Silver, who is knocked out, into the panic room. The argument is such an encapsulation on how these two might disagree over things, but they do really love each other. Gosh, I really love them, and I really want a relationship like that. Anyway, with Castle Mobius now firmly under Dark Presence control, they end up reviving the in stasis King Shadow. Okay, look, I understand that the concept of a brutal despot version of Shadow doesn't make too much sense considering the comic's characterization of Shadow at the time. But you know what? I've established already that Mobius 3 years later isn't really something to be taken seriously. It's just a fun, silly little look at the future, and you know what? Give me King Shadow. Give me more. And I mean, look at this art and tell me that this isn't a cool idea. I mean, this is just awesome. What's not cool is that King Shadow doesn't have a ton of comic time in the story. He's a major force in issue 3, but is kinda casted aside later on for another villain, Tiki Chaos. Which, yes, you have heard that correctly. This is an unholy fusion of Tikio and Chaos from Sonic Adventure. It's as cool as it sounds. So with King Shadow being absolutely mad for being in stasis for 5 years, he wants to unleash them to destroy Mobius. This is where Linda's motivations from earlier shine through. She objects and argues that her motivations were for control, where Shadow just wants to harm the entire world essentially. It's a clash of two very different villainous motivations that reach their climax here, ending with Shadow breaking the armband that keeps Linda anchored to this timeline, causing her to be dissolved from reality. It's just like, I don't know, that's just like the most horrific sight. I mean, just look at this. Yikes. Archie Sonic, creating nightmare fuel since 1993. In the meantime, our heroes decide to have some much needed help, starting with Agril the Crocodile, son of Victor, and I have more questions than answers, so let's move on. We're also introduced to Jacque? Okay, full disclosure, I have tried to look up how to pronounce their name, and I have found nothing on it, so you know what? We're just gonna call them Southern Antoine. Yeah, that'll work. Southern Antoine and Belle, children of Bunny and Antoine, which, once more, I have more questions than answers, so let's move on. With our heroes now assembled, they'll now need to take back Castle Mobius from the Dark Presence, and they actually do that really quickly. Like, I honestly expected, like, more time to be spent on this, but, you know what, it works. Let's just move on. But none of that really matters as King Shadow is about to unleash perfect Tiki Chaos onto the world, setting our course for our grand finale. And the finale overall feels similar to the conclusion of Sonic Adventure, with a major difference is that, unlike Sonic who fought Perfect Chaos solo, everyone here has the opportunity to show off their unique abilities, such as Southern Antoine with his swordsmanship and Silver with their telekinesis. In the end, it turns out the same weakness for Perfect Chaos is the same for Perfect Tiki Chaos, which is to cause brain damage. I mean, I could just make it watch Sonic Underground, it would probably get the same result. However, one thing that King Sonic did not account for when trying this trick again is the fact it has freaking lasers. Gosh, I'm sorry, I know this monster is only in like one issue of this comic, but you know what? I freaking love it. In the end, Sonia and Manic are the ones to save the day. No, not those ones, the other ones. Yes, thank you. Afterwards, there's some banter, Silver returns to their own timeline, and we have one last shot of the next generation of freedom fighters, which sadly we'll never see again. Yeah, that's the real issue with Mobius 30 years later. Well, it is simple, some of the creative choices are questionable, and there's not enough of certain characters, King Shadow. It would still be a solid introduction to new stories in Light Mobius. While we would have cameos in Silver's future and an alternate version of Lara Sue in the Silver Saga, we would never see Light Mobius after this. I don't know if there were more stories in the cards, but for me, the way this arc is structured leans heavily in that direction. I mean, it is very simple, it's easy for new readers to understand it, relatively, and it also satisfies old fans too. To me, it's an introduction that can do both, and did so really successfully, honestly. Essentially what we're left with is the equivalent of a pilot episode of a television series that never got picked up. It's really a darn shame, because I would have loved to see more of this batcrap crazy world and its characters. I glossed over so much for this review, and there's more I want to talk about with it. Regardless of the reason there might have been, Mobius 3 years later is still a flawed but fun arc. I recommend reading it for the sheer insanity of it, but also just because it's fun. Not the best arc of this series, not by a long shot, but it's still a lot of fun to read. It's only a shame that the future for this future was never meant to be. That's all for this episode of Jordan's Soapbox. If you must excuse me, I need to figure out how to use time travel to erase the Lara Sue Chronicles from existence. Hey, thanks so much for visiting the Jordania Volcano Hotel today. We hope that you come back and see us again soon. If you liked that video, remember to subscribe and be sure to check out our other social media with the links below. Until next time, safe travels out there.